So it is my honor, now that we have the housekeeping out of the way, to introduce our first speaker for this afternoon. Leanna Scaglione is our first patient perspective speaker. She was 16 years old when she was diagnosed with neurofibromatosis type 2 related schwannomatosis. This rare genetic disorder is primarily characterized by the growth of benign tumors on nerves, including those that transmit balance and sound impulses to the inner ears to the brain. As a budding ballet dancer, this news was devastating to Leanna and her family. However, she quickly realized that she refused to live as defined by her condition and diagnosis. The removal of a grapefruit-sized tumor on her spine left her in a wheelchair during her high school years. After learning to walk again, she completed 3 chemotherapy drug trials, truly taking charge of her diagnosis and her life. She has gone through numerous surgeries, most recently surgery to remove her right acoustic neuroma, leaving her completely deaf in her right ear. She continues to live her best life as an endurance runner, sharing her story and experiences living with NF2-SWN. She hopes to spread awareness, motivate her community, and rally for a cure. You can find her candid experience on social media with the handle at Leanne_runningnf2. Please join me in welcoming Leanna.
So, as mentioned, I have neurofibromatosis type 2 related schwannomatosis. Whoever decided to update the name of that, I'm very sorry. Neurofibromatosis was long enough. But as mentioned, I was diagnosed back when I was 16 years old. It was a very interesting time for me because, one, you're a teenager, and that's just interesting enough as it is. And I kind of had the rug ripped out from underneath me. I really didn't know what was happening. And when that happened with that grapefruit-sized tumor, there was no diagnosis that came with it. It was just a surprise that there was a tumor there, and it was completely unexpected. And when it came out, I had 2 surgeries to remove it. And the nerve damage in my right leg was so significant, it had me in the wheelchair. The muscles were functioning great. It was just the sensation nerves were completely gone. Imagine your leg being completely dead asleep when you go to step on it and you just don't feel it there. That's what it was like for me. And so it would collapse after a few seconds of pressure being put on it. It was really tough for me because I was told, yeah, you'll be able to walk again eventually, but probably not do ballet because when you go on point, that nerve is going to line up and you are going to fall on your face. So that really was quite annoying to me, and I said, we will see about that. And so I spent most of my junior year of high school trying to relearn how to walk on the side, and all the while balancing the depressing aspect of trying to figure out what did I want to do after college because all my plans were completely ruined now. I was very angry that I was being told that you're just like everyone else. No 16-year-old knows what they're doing after high school. And I'm like, thanks, that's not the point. I already did know. It's gone now. And I just kind of hold myself up, and I was alone, and I didn't want to connect to anyone about it. I didn't really want to talk to my mom about it, and I just wanted to deal with it in my own time. And that moment, that mission was get me out of this wheelchair. And coincidentally enough, in most states, I believe, there's the state fitness exam where they make you do all like the sit-ups and the push-ups and everything and run a mile in a certain amount of time. Well, I knew I wasn't going to be able to run the mile, but I wanted to walk it. And my gym teacher did not know that I was going to try and do this. So I had one of the classmates carry me up to where they had the setup for the mile. They placed me towards the back so I wouldn't be in anyone's way. And the gym teacher spotted me and had, I think, a heart attack right then and there. Because I was standing there, no wheelchair around. The wheelchair was left back in the building, wasn't even nearby. And I was like, you're gonna let me walk this. I'm gonna do it. And by walk, I mean I shuffled. I really did not walk like a normal human being. But she let me do it. She realized with the determination on my face and why I was doing it. She knew my background. She knew what my original goal was with ballet. And she's like, all right, we'll do it. We'll wait to see how long this takes you to do it. After around like the second lap, she was like, I think you've done enough, maybe stop. And I was like, no, I have to do the whole mile. It took me about a half hour. And I did it, and I was super proud of myself. And it was actually a couple months later, I had a follow-up MRI with my neurosurgeon to see how everything was healing and how I was doing. There was another tumor. And that's when my neurosurgeon kind of looked at my mom and I and kind of expressed the reality of the situation. He was like, I was hoping this would be a one-off, but seeing as there's another tumor there, and since the first one was a schwannoma tumor, it tested as that, he suspected NF2 or schwannomatosis for me, which is another type of NF. And so he had me get an MRI of my brain. They did a blood test for genetic testing, and they also did a tissue sample of the other tumor and sent everything out. I had a full MRI also of my spine, and it turns out there were now 2 tumors in my spine, 1 in my shoulder, and 2 acoustic neuromas, 1 on the left and 1 on the right. And everything was confirmed to say that I had NF2. To have a label to know that this tumor wasn't a one-off chance, I denied it. I did not accept it. I didn't believe that this was actually happening because you didn't feel them, you didn't see them, they weren't poking out of the skin, but here this MRI scan was saying, no, this is your future. This is the rest of your life. And it got to a point where I started feeling around for lumps and bumps, and I realized there were 2 right here underneath the scalp on my head. There was actually 1 on my toe, another one on the side of my right calf, and in my Achilles tendon pocket. And I went on a mission to remove every single tumor in my body because I believed that was the cure. It's not the cure. There is no cure. There's nothing that's going to stop these tumors from growing. And my neurosurgeon caught on because it got to the point that by the time I was 18, I had 5.5 tumors removed from my body. He figured out what I was doing and trying to remove all of them because at that point, the next step was the acoustic neuromas. And the problem with the acoustic neuromas at that time is they were too tiny. They were way too tiny to do anything operable. I had 100% hearing in both of my ears. I didn't experience any balance issues or other side effects related to these types of tumors. And so any doctor I saw was saying, you are crazy, we are not removing them. And so I just had to sit in my little misery of not being able to remove them. But I told myself from that day on, still in denial about having NF, that I was just going to continue living my life no matter what, just see what happens in front of me. So I went to college, went through my freshman year, changed my major twice, and I found out after finally getting matched up with a neuro-oncologist because, mind you, my mom went into superhero mode and dived headfirst into the research where I told her to go away, don't tell me about it, I don't want to know. But she managed to find out that there were drug trials and everything, and at that time, the lapatinib trial popped up, which was the first kind of big one that was really on the market for NF2. And I was like, well, since you won't remove them surgically for me, I will go on this drug trial. That was my compromise. And also at the time, they were still quite small, these acoustic neuromas. So I figured, what do I have to lose if this doesn't work for me? And so I went on it, and I was on it for about a year. It shrunk the left one. The right one did absolutely nothing to it. And eventually, towards the end of the year, the left one did unfortunately start growing again. But lo and behold, another trial was about to come into play. And I was like, sign me up. Well, it was a bad idea. All the chemicals going in and out of my body at that time, it was way too much. And one of the major side effects from a lot of these drugs and these drug trials, it can cause major depression. And if you're already prone to that, it's not exactly a great combination. So this is now about going into my senior year of college. I'm about to start the second trial. And for my senior thesis, mind you, this is now 6 majors later that I changed because I still couldn't decide what I wanted to do in life. I was now a creative writing major. And the great fun part about being a creative writing major is that you got to write a creative piece of your choice. So if you aspire to write children's novels, you got to write a children's novel as your thesis. And people who knew me and knew what happened to me with the tumor and the wheelchair and the whole experience, they're like, oh my gosh, you're amazing, you're this superhero. And I'm like, yes, I am. So I selfishly decided to write a memoir. The problem with that is I still hadn't actually fully acknowledged my diagnosis or accepted it. And in the combination of having to reflect on all of this and having to write about it while also being on this chemo drug trial, I hit rock bottom. I didn't cope very well. I ended up going into group therapy. I put a pause on college. They helped get me there. One of my friends at the time happened to have been one of the RAs. And I didn't realize it, but I sent her a text in the midst of one of my breakdowns. And she was in the middle of doing something with one of the clubs on campus. And next thing I knew, she was like barging into my dorm room. And she's like, all right, I'm not your friend right now. I am your RA. Let's go, wrap it up. I'm driving you to the nearest mental place. We're checking you in. We're done. We're not doing this. I guess apparently my mental breakdown was a little bit more obvious to the outside world than I thought I was helping with myself. And I thought I was keeping it in, but I really wasn't. But I did a group therapy program where I went there every single day. I did not stay overnight because I knew that would completely traumatize me. I just wasn't a fan of that situation for me and knew what would happen. But it was a lot to take in, and my senior thesis ended up being me journaling every single day, being in that group therapy. And it helped me, it really did. And the mental support of having that and forcing myself to kind of face it while at the same time realizing, hey, maybe you don't need to do as deep of a dive on this diagnosis as you think you do. It definitely taught me a lesson that there is balance between fully investing yourself and living defined by your diagnosis and ignoring it. You can't just ignore it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to take care of yourself. And this moment kind of allowed me to be like, okay, I went this far living my life. Why should I stop now, even though I'm starting to acknowledge it? And so for the rest of my 20s, I made sure to be attentive during my appointments and pay attention. I kicked my mom out of the room during my appointments because it used to be I would have her in there to pay attention for me because I zoned out and didn't want anything to do with it. And I started to force myself to take charge of my treatment plan. And lucky for me, my acoustic neuromas were still slow growing. And so I was able to just monitor them for a good 10, 11 years. Yes?
I have a question. What would happen if you had stayed overnight? Like, what was the fare?
Like the price?
No, in regards to when you were with the mental breakdown, like, what was the fare of staying overnight? Do you feel like?
I feel like it would have gotten worse for me. But mental health is a very tricky thing with my family. It runs in the family of bipolar disorder. So I have seen family members going in and out of hospitals. I also was on the trend of binge watching Girl Interrupted for some reason, which not a great idea if you're also depressed. I don't recommend it. So it was kind of like that internal trauma of realizing maybe this wasn't the best, and just the group daily therapy of just going in for the day program to take the time to reflect. Because I also knew I wasn't fully ready to accept all of that yet, even though I was making a point to. So it was a compromise for myself to just dip my toe in the water of this whole acknowledgement. Yeah. But so I want to say around the pandemic, shortly before it, is when the acoustic neuroma growth really started to uptick, especially on the right one, which was very interesting because it was typically very stable for many, many years. But for some odd reason, it just decided to double in size every 6 months. And so I started to get MRIs more frequently. And the doctor that I was seeing, he was like, hey, there's this new trial that's coming through the pipeline. I would love to have you on it. I know you're a little bit hesitant about trials just because of what happened in the past, group therapy. And so I was like, you know what? It's been some time. I know you're going to take good care of me. I'm in good hands. I'll consider it. Well, the pandemic happened, which meant trials were put on hold. And so I missed out on a trial for a good 2 years because of it. And that gave my tumor 2 more years to grow on its own and have a little party inside my brain. I started to finally lose hearing in my right ear. I started to experience some balance issues. I always thought it was just because I was klutzy. It turns out I really was actually having problems with my vestibular system. But I finally got lucky. The neratinib trial opened up and I was able to join it a 1.5 years ago. And it was just like old times being on the trial. I could tell my mood swings were definitely more sensitive, and I was more sensitive to my emotions and the things around me. But lucky for me, I had a very supportive work environment. I switched jobs during the pandemic, and I made sure that when I found this job, that it would accommodate whatever future was for me with NF, because I knew with this tumor growth, to remove the right acoustic neuroma was in the near future at this point. And I needed to have a job that would support me through the healing process of this, would support me through another chemo trial. And I've got very, very lucky with my current job. They are super flexible with a work from home environment for me if I'm not feeling great and need to stay home another day. They let me stay and work from home for a solid 3 months when I first started the trial to make sure that I was really comfortable. And even if it was a day that I was just too tired, but I was awake enough to work, they still let me work from home. And it was just really great to be with that type of team. And during that trial and during the pandemic, I took up running. I didn't really think running was an option for me, but during the pandemic, I got tired of looking at the 4 walls of my living room and doing at-home workouts just like everyone else. And so I went outside and I was walking and I was like, this is kind of slow. So I started running and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm running. And then the next thing I knew, I ran a mile and I was like, this is amazing. I really like this. And I experienced the runner's high and I understood why running is fun for people. And my mom, I called her up and I was telling her the great news, like my leg, it didn't collapse out from underneath me. It was great. I had so much fun. And she's like, you know, you live in the city, right? New York Roadrunners hosts race in Central Park. You should sign up for one because your dad was a runner and he would do that. And he ran the marathon 7 times. And I was like, oh yeah, good point. So I signed up for a race and it was a simple short 4-mile one. And I was hooked. It was great. I didn't know anyone there, but just the excitement of being in that environment and knowing you're with people who love doing this, it was just such an experience. And then the lottery for the New York City half marathon opened up. And I was like, sold. I'm gonna do this. And so I dropped my name into the hat. I got selected. And the day of the race came, I trained, I was ready. Mile 4, up ahead of me, I saw another runner wearing a jersey for Children's Tumor Foundation. They have this big logo on the back that says End NF. And I started to cry because I remembered finally in that moment that they're here in the city, one of their offices, and I tried to catch up to this runner. I could not. They were that far ahead of me. But I told myself from that day forward, any race that I possibly could, I was going to run with this foundation. And it was very interesting for me because I never wanted to connect with other people who had NF. I didn't want to relate to them. I didn't want to compare because a lot of times it became, well, what tumor do you have? My tumor is this size. Your tumor is that size. Well, this. And it became of like whose situation was worse. And I was like, I don't want that. Like, why can't we all just accept the fact that we have NF and no one has to question, hey, why do you have that lump? Why do you have that surgical scar? And we can just hang out and be people. And CTF really has that. And I found that with them. And so in the midst of all of this and me starting my trial, I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready to start sharing my story. And so I started logging every single day on Instagram and TikTok and doing daily check-ins about how the chemo trial was doing, how I felt, was I tired, what were the side effects, what are my results, how am I feeling? And I gained a following and I had so many people reach out and say, oh my gosh, I have NF. It's so great to hear someone actually talk about living with NF. No one does this, thank you. And it just became this amazing feeling. And I shared all the heartaches and everything, especially when I found out that the chemo trial wasn't working. And I followed it through until Christmas Eve of this past Christmas Eve. I followed it through, and only because it slowed down the growth of the tumor, but it wasn't stopping it. And at that point, I was told it needed to come out. So this past January, I had my right acoustic neuroma removed. I am fully deaf in my right ear now. I did have an ABI implant installed, which is very interesting because my processor, all I hear through it is buzzing. And so it's a weird thing to adjust to, but after that surgery and everything in the recovery, which was not fun, because I actually had extra spinal fluid leaking because it was attacking the ABI implant. Not always the best comforting thing to have a fluid bubble underneath your scalp. Makes you extra dizzy and does not help with the headaches as you're healing. But I was already signed up for the New York City half this year. And we were getting down to the crunch time of me getting clearance to run again. And then February 29th, I was finally told, you can run again, just don't overdo it. I'm like, yeah, no, I won't overdo it. What are you talking about? And I tried. Luckily, I had an amazing team member from NF Endurance, which is the team for Children's Tumor Foundation. They ran with me for the first time to make sure that I was going to be okay, and if I needed any help, there was someone with me. And I just kind of casually ran, and then this past Sunday, I ran the New York City Half Marathon. It was definitely an interesting experience because I told myself, clearly you're not going to get a personal best with this race, so just go out and have fun. And I somehow managed to still finish within 20 minutes of my usual time. I don't know. I literally did stop and have fun. I have pictures of proof of me finding every photographer on that course. I even stopped at the cheer section. I just still managed to do it. Of course, the next day, I was very aware of my calf muscles and could not walk. Do not recommend it. But it was just something I knew I had to do. Yeah.
You have, your story is amazing. Thank you so much. And it's making me think, I feel like I'm on the journey with you. My question, when you were discovering the tumors, is that something that you is this something that you felt and there was a difference? Or were you having symptoms? Were you oh, something feels weird?
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but can you maybe catch her at the networking break so we can just keep on schedule? Thanks.
Should I answer or?
Maybe just go ahead and wrap up.
Okay, sure. I'll catch you after. But running this race, it really was something that I needed to do for myself, to just tell myself, you can still live your life. And I realized it was the same reason why I walked that mile in high school. And I know that other people out there are struggling with the same sort of way of how do I balance my diagnosis and my life and how I always live it. And I just continue to tell people, live your best life, because that's the only way you can do it. You can't let a tumor define your dreams and your hopes. And yeah, okay, it's gonna probably shift the direction it goes in, but you just gotta live your life. You gotta enjoy it. And I hope to inspire people that. Thank you.